"You need a woman like me?" Apache woman said to the cowboy that had saved her life. The sun was setting slowly over the wide plains of the Arizona territory, painting the sky with soft shades of orange, pink, and gold. The land stretched endlessly in every direction, with small clusters of cactus, rocky hills, and the occasional dry riverbed marking the landscape. A lone cowboy rode through the dusty trails, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of dirt as he moved. His name was Daniel Hayes. He was a man of quiet habits, known by the few people who had seen him around the trading posts as honest, careful, and independent. He had no family nearby, and he preferred it that way. Life had taught him that solitude could be peaceful if one respected the land and the rhythm of daily life. Daniel's days were long and full of work. He spent them riding cattle across the plains, checking fences, and helping wherever needed at small ranches. Even though life could be lonely, he found satisfaction in the simplicity of his work. Every morning he woke before the sun, saddled his horse, and headed into the vastness of the desert, knowing that the world, though harsh at times, was also full of beauty. The way the wind moved through the tall grass, the way the sunlight touched the rocks just right, and the quiet moments in the evening when he could see the stars emerging one by one, all of it made life feel alive and meaningful to him. On this particular day, Daniel had been delivering supplies to a small trading post near Tucson. He had traveled several miles across rough trails, passing the dry, cracked land that showed the marks of long, hot months with little rain. As he rode back home, he noticed a thin column of smoke rising in the distance. At first, he thought it was a small campfire, perhaps a traveler resting or a rancher tending an evening fire. But as he got closer, he realized the smoke was dark and thick. It was unusual, and it made him uneasy. The smell of burning wood and the way the smoke twisted and rose unnaturally made him instinctively slow his horse and observe. Daniel had grown up hearing stories of conflicts and dangers in the region. The land was vast and sometimes lawless, with both settlers and native tribes trying to protect themselves and their resources. Though he knew that he must be careful, Daniel could not ignore the signs of trouble. As he moved closer, he could see that the smoke came from a small Apache camp. The tents were damaged, their coverings torn or scattered. It looked as if the camp had been abandoned in a hurry. Supplies were strewn about, and some items were partially burned. The silence was eerie. Normally, the sounds of a camp, the laughter, conversations, or the faint rustle of activity would carry even across a distance. But here, there was only quiet. He felt a strange mix of caution and concern. Daniel dismounted his horse, tying it carefully to a nearby tree so it wouldn't wander. He stepped slowly over the dry earth, noting every detail. Then, from behind a fallen tree near the edge of the camp, he heard it, a soft, labored sound of someone breathing. It was faint but unmistakable. Daniel froze for a moment. Whoever it was might be in danger or perhaps frightened enough to react. He carefully approached, making sure to keep his movements slow and deliberate. Behind the tree he saw her, a young Apache woman lying on the ground, her clothes torn slightly and her face marked with dirt and minor scrapes. Her hair, dark and thick, fell across her shoulders. She was breathing but weakly, and her eyes, though wide and alert, showed a mix of fear and determination. Daniel could see she had been through a lot, and yet there was a fire in her gaze that told him she would not give up easily. Daniel hesitated. He knew that helping her might bring complications. Out here, trust was fragile, and helping someone from a tribe could be misunderstood by others. Yet leaving her behind was unthinkable. His values, simple but firm, told him that no person should be left to suffer when he had the ability to help. Carefully, he lifted her onto his horse, supporting her weight as gently as possible. She flinched at first but did not resist. Her eyes watched him intently, trying to gauge his intentions. As he rode away from the camp, Daniel kept looking around, wary of anyone who might still be near. The desert stretched endlessly before him, but the journey felt safer than staying behind. He had a destination in mind, an old cabin he used occasionally, far from towns and roads. It was a quiet place where he could tend to her injuries without interruptions or prying eyes. The ride was slow. He made sure she was comfortable, adjusting her position and giving her water from a small canteen. Every now and then she would murmur softly, almost unintelligibly, but Daniel did not speak much. Words were not needed, actions mattered more. When they reached the cabin, he gently helped her inside. The cabin was small, made of rough timber and stones, with a simple fireplace at one end. He laid her on a bed of blankets, ensuring she was warm and protected from the chilly evening wind that crept through the gaps in the walls. Then he began tending to her injuries. Though he was not a trained healer, he knew enough to clean scrapes and wrap minor cuts to prevent infection. He moved carefully, his hands steady as he worked. For the next few days, Daniel dedicated himself to caring for her. She was unconscious at first, and he worried constantly, checking her breathing and her temperature. The cabin, though simple, became a temporary sanctuary. Outside, the world continued its harsh routine, the wind carrying dust, the distant calls of animals, and the fading light marking the passing of each day. Inside, there was quiet, broken only by the soft sounds of Daniel's work and her occasional groans as she shifted in sleep. When she finally opened her eyes, she was startled. Her first instinct was fear. She tried to move quickly, wincing in pain, but Daniel placed a hand gently on her shoulder to calm her. His expression was calm and steady, reassuring without words. He told her she was safe, that he meant no harm, and that she could rest. Slowly, she relaxed, though her eyes remained cautious and wary. Her name, when she finally spoke it, was Apache. She spoke softly at first, her voice cautious, but there was strength in it. Daniel did not ask questions about the attack immediately. He let her recover, understanding that trust could not be forced. Instead, he continued his care quietly, bringing food, fresh water, and tending to her injuries. He never treated her as a guest or a burden, only as someone who needed help. Over the next week, she observed him closely. He was patient, respectful, and quiet. He never made assumptions about her or her people. He listened carefully when she began to share small stories of her journey and the people she had traveled with. She spoke of her family, her home, and the small lessons learned from life in the desert. Daniel listened without judgment, understanding that her experiences were different from his own, yet human in their shared essence. One evening, as the sky turned deep shades of purple and red, Apache spoke. "You are not like the others," she said softly. Daniel looked at her a little surprised. "No one deserves to be left to die," he replied simply. It was the truth he had lived by his whole life. In her gaze, he saw both acknowledgement and curiosity. By the end of that first part of their story, Daniel and Apache had formed a silent understanding. It was not friendship yet, nor was it full trust, but it was the beginning of something fragile and precious. In the quiet cabin, away from judgment and conflict, two people from very different worlds had begun to connect through acts of care, patience, and respect. The vast desert outside, with all its dangers and beauty, seemed to shrink around the small cabin, where two lives had already begun to intersect. Apache's recovery was slow but steady. Each morning, sunlight streamed through the small windows of the cabin, casting long, warm beams across the wooden floor. Daniel would rise early, long before the sun had fully peaked over the horizon, and begin his morning chores. The sound of his horse moving outside, the creak of wooden floorboards, and the soft whisper of the wind through the cracks in the cabin made for a quiet rhythm that both grounded him and seemed to comfort Apache. At first, Apache barely spoke. She would watch Daniel from her bed or from the small chair near the fire, studying his movements carefully. Her eyes were sharp and thoughtful, always observing. She had learned early in life that caution could save her from danger, and even now, though her body was healing, her mind remained alert. She noticed every small gesture, every choice he made, and it slowly built a picture of the man who had saved her life. He was careful but decisive, patient but strong, quiet but full of thoughtful action. Daniel, for his part, gave her space. He never pressured her to speak, never forced conversation. He would prepare food, clean the cabin, fetch water from the nearby stream, and tend to her injuries. He moved with quiet determination, aware that every small act of care mattered. He understood that trust was not something that could be demanded. It had to be earned patiently through consistent action. As the days passed, small routines began to form. In the early morning, Daniel would tend to the small vegetable patch he had planted near the cabin. It was nothing fancy, just a few rows of hardy plants, but it was enough to provide fresh greens and herbs. He would bring water to Apache, encourage her to eat slowly, and sometimes read aloud from the few books he kept. She began to listen, first with half-interest, then with genuine curiosity. The stories he read were simple tales about the land, about people learning to survive and thrive, and about honesty, courage, and kindness. One afternoon, as Daniel worked on repairing a small section of the cabin roof, Apache spoke for the first time in full sentences. "Why do you help me?" she asked, her voice still soft but steady. She had been gathering water from the stream, holding the wooden bucket carefully in her hands, and she looked directly at him, her dark eyes searching for an answer. Daniel paused, resting his hands on the worn wooden beams. He considered the question carefully before answering. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "No one deserves to be left alone when they are in need." Apache studied him for a moment. Her people had taught her to be wary of strangers, to protect herself and her family. Trust was something rare, and yet she could see honesty in his eyes. It was not the kind of honesty that spoke only in words, but one that showed in his actions, in the way he moved, in the way he treated her without expectation or demand. Slowly, she began to feel a warmth she hadn't felt since the attack on her camp. Over the next week, their conversations grew. Apache shared stories of her childhood, of the small village where she had learned to gather food, care for animals, and understand the rhythms of the land. She spoke of her family and her people, of traditions passed down through generations, and of lessons learned from hardship. Daniel listened attentively, asking questions not to test her but to understand her world. He learned about the ceremonies, the songs, and the ways her people celebrated life. Each story made her stronger in her own eyes, and each question he asked made her feel respected rather than pitied. Daniel, in turn, shared his own experiences. He spoke of his parents, who had passed away when he was young, leaving him to learn the ways of ranch life on his own. He spoke of the loneliness that came with life on the plains, of the satisfaction in seeing a task completed well, and of the simple joys in watching the sunrise or listening to the wind through the grass. Apache listened closely, fascinated by the quiet strength in his life, and the way he found contentment in simplicity. As the days turned into weeks, a sense of rhythm and mutual respect developed between them. Mornings were for chores and tending to the land. Afternoons were for learning and sharing stories. Evenings were quiet, spent near the fire, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast, open sky. Apache began to notice small details about Daniel. How his hands were steady when he worked, how his eyes softened when he looked at her, how he listened without interrupting, and how he never judged her for her past experiences. One day, while Daniel was repairing a section of the fence around the cabin, Apache joined him outside. She had grown strong enough to walk without assistance, and she carried a small basket of freshly gathered herbs. "You work hard every day," she said, placing the basket on a nearby stump. "Do you ever rest?" Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled faintly. "Rest is good," he said, "but work keeps the mind busy, and busy minds are less troubled." Apache nodded thoughtfully. She admired his dedication and the calm confidence he exuded. It was unlike anything she had seen before. Most people she had encountered were either afraid or impatient, but Daniel moved with purpose, and he seemed to understand the world in a way that was steady and kind. Over time, the quiet moments became just as important as the busy ones. They would sit together by the fireplace in the evening, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes sharing comfortable silence. Apache began to trust him more, feeling safer in his presence than she had since the attack. She noticed that she laughed occasionally at his quiet humor, and she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. One afternoon, Daniel took her to a small clearing near the cabin, where the sunlight fell gently on the tall grass. "There's a spring nearby," he said, "fresh water and good for washing." He helped her carefully down the small slope, steadying her as they walked. The sound of flowing water was soothing, and for the first time since the attack, Apache felt completely at ease. She splashed some water on her face, feeling the coolness refresh her tired body, and smiled. "You saved me," she said quietly, looking at him. "You didn't know me, and yet you helped me." Daniel shrugged, as if it were no big thing. "I only did what anyone should do," he replied. "Life is easier when we look out for each other." Apache thought about that. Her world had always taught her to be careful, to trust little, and to survive on her own. But now she realized that not everyone acted out of fear or greed. Some people acted out of kindness, and that was a powerful thing. As the days passed, she began to move more confidently, helping Daniel with small tasks around the cabin. She carried firewood, helped tend the garden, and even assisted in preparing meals. Each act, though small, gave her a sense of purpose and restored her confidence. She realized that survival was not only about avoiding danger, but also about building connections, learning, and sharing strength with others. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of red and gold, Apache sat quietly by the fire, watching Daniel as he repaired a small section of the cabin. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the attack on her camp, the fear, the pain, and now this quiet, steady life of healing and care. She realized that in helping her, Daniel had not only saved her body but had also given her hope. "You are not like the others," she said softly, breaking the silence. Daniel looked up, surprised. "No one deserves to be left alone," he replied simply. It was a truth he had lived by all his life, and in that moment Apache understood it fully. By the end of this part of their story, the bond between them had grown stronger. Trust was forming, slowly but surely, built on actions rather than words. Each day brought new lessons, shared experiences, and quiet moments of understanding. Daniel and Apache, though from very different worlds, were beginning to see the value in each other's presence. The cabin, small and humble as it was, had become a place of safety, learning, and connection. A place where two lives, so different at the beginning, were starting to intertwine through patience, care, and mutual respect. The vast desert outside remained as wide and harsh as ever, but inside the cabin, a sense of calm, hope, and possibility had taken root. Apache knew that her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt that she was not alone. Daniel, too, realized that in helping her, he had found a companion of spirit and strength. Their lives were no longer entirely separate. They were connected by a shared experience, and a quiet understanding that grew stronger with each passing day. The days had grown warmer as spring settled over the Arizona territory, and the desert was beginning to show its quiet beauty. Small wildflowers peeked out among the rocks. Streams that had run low during winter were now fuller, and the air carried a gentle sweetness from the desert blooms. Apache had regained much of her strength, walking confidently across the cabin grounds, helping Daniel with chores and exploring the small areas of land around them. The quiet rhythm of their lives had become familiar, and a deep trust had grown between them. One morning, as the first light of day touched the cabin, Apache approached Daniel with a determined look. She had been thinking about the people she had left behind, the small group from her camp who had survived the attack. Though she had been weak and frightened before, she now felt strong enough to find them and ensure their safety. "I must return," she said softly, yet firmly, "to see if anyone survived." Daniel listened carefully. He understood the importance of family, community, and duty. He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, "but it is not a safe journey. Do you want me to come with you?" Apache considered the offer. She knew the desert could be dangerous, with rough terrain, wild animals, and unpredictable weather. But having Daniel with her meant she would have a strong ally, someone she trusted completely. She realized that she had grown to depend on his steady presence, even if she had not admitted it fully. "Yes," she said finally, "I would feel safer if you came with me." Packing light, they prepared for the journey. Daniel brought water, dried food, and a few supplies for emergencies. Apache carried a small satchel with personal items and herbs she had collected. They mounted their horses and rode out into the desert, following the trails she remembered from the journey with her group. The sun was bright, and the wind carried a warm, comforting breeze that made the journey feel less harsh than it might have in winter. As they traveled, the two shared stories and laughter, letting the quiet moments ease the tension of the journey. Apache spoke of her people's traditions, the lessons learned from elders, and the simple joys of desert life. She told Daniel about the songs sung around evening fires, the dances held during special celebrations, and the respect for nature that guided their daily actions. Daniel listened with genuine interest, asking questions not to test her knowledge but to learn and understand. Daniel, in turn, shared his experiences as a cowboy. He spoke of the long rides across open plains, the satisfaction of a hard day's work, and the quiet moments under the stars when the world seemed infinite. He told stories of small towns, trading posts, and people he had met along the way, some kind, some not, and how he had learned to value patience, honesty, and observation. Apache listened closely, appreciating the wisdom he carried in his quiet ways. On the second day of their journey, they approached a small canyon that Apache remembered from her travels. Hidden among the rocks were signs of life, smoke rising from a small fire, the sound of movement and faint voices carrying across the air. Apache's heart beat faster. She knew she had found survivors from her group. She signaled Daniel to stay close but not to move too quickly, and together they approached carefully. Emerging from the rocks, they found a small group of Apache people, their expressions cautious and uncertain. They had survived the attack and had regrouped here, hidden from view. Apache stepped forward, speaking in her language, explaining her journey and introducing Daniel. The initial tension in the group slowly melted as they realized he had come only to help, not to harm. The leader of the group, an older woman named Kaya, stepped forward and studied Daniel with careful eyes. "He has helped you?" she asked, her voice filled with cautious respect. Apache nodded, recounting the story of how Daniel had found her injured and carried her to safety. Kaya's expression softened and a faint smile appeared. "You are fortunate," she said. "It is rare to find someone so willing to help without asking anything in return." Daniel nodded politely, not seeking praise. "I only did what anyone should do," he said simply. His words, like his actions, carried honesty and humility. The group slowly welcomed him, and he helped in small ways, carrying supplies, assisting with minor tasks, and sharing knowledge of the terrain. Though he was an outsider, his respect for their people and customs allowed him to be accepted gradually. Apache watched as Daniel moved among her people, observing, helping, and listening. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. Not only had he saved her life, but he was also showing kindness, patience, and understanding to her entire community. She realized that the bond they shared had grown stronger, not only between them, but also in the way he respected and connected with her people. One evening, after a long day of settling the survivors and helping them feel secure, Apache and Daniel sat together near the fire. The air was cool, and the sky overhead was filled with countless stars. Apache turned to Daniel, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You have changed so much for me," she said softly. "You could have left, but you didn't. You stayed and helped. You are not just brave, you are wise, patient, and kind." Daniel smiled quietly, feeling a warmth he had not expected. "I did what I felt was right, that is all." She studied him for a long moment, then spoke words that surprised him. "You need a woman like me," she said with a quiet confidence. "A woman who is strong, who understands life, who has survived hardships, and who can stand beside you as an equal." Daniel looked at her, taken aback. He had spent years alone, believing solitude was safer than connection. Yet, hearing her words, he realized how much they resonated with him. He had found companionship not only in her presence, but also in her courage, wisdom, and spirit. "You are strong," he said finally. "I see that clearly, and I respect it." Apache smiled, feeling the trust between them deepen. It was not a simple affection born from circumstance, but a mutual respect, a recognition of each other's strengths, and the understanding that they could face life's challenges together. The following days were spent helping her people rebuild. Daniel shared his knowledge of livestock, farming, and basic repairs. Apache guided him in understanding the customs, stories, and practices of her people. Together, they learned from each other, bridging the gap between two worlds that had seemed so different at first. As they worked side by side, Daniel began to notice the quiet ways Apache led and inspired her people. She was patient, thoughtful, and strong, guiding them with confidence yet never demanding. He admired her ability to stay calm in difficult situations, to find solutions without force, and to encourage those around her. It reminded him that strength was not always measured by physical ability, but by courage, intelligence, and compassion. In turn, Apache noticed Daniel's steady presence. He never judged, never demanded, and never sought control. His quiet ways allowed her people to feel at ease, and his skills and knowledge brought practical support. She realized that strength could also come in gentleness, and that his calmness and patience were as valuable as her own courage. One afternoon, they took a break from work and sat together on a small hill overlooking the canyon. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the land. Apache spoke softly. "We are from different worlds, yet here we are. You have saved me, and now we share this time together. Do you ever wonder why life brings such moments?" Daniel looked at the horizon, watching the colors change. "I think life gives us opportunities to connect with others, to learn, and to grow. Sometimes it comes in ways we do not expect." Apache nodded, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. She realized that she had found someone who saw her as an equal, who respected her strength, and who had become a companion in both challenge and calm. As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, they sat in silence, feeling the comfort of mutual understanding. It was a quiet courage, the courage to trust, to share, and to recognize strength in one another. They had crossed deserts, faced uncertainty, and discovered a bond that was grounded in respect, care, and patience. By the end of this part of the story, Daniel and Apache had formed a partnership that was no longer just about survival. It was about shared experiences, trust, and the recognition of each other's worth. Though challenges still lay ahead, they had discovered the strength to face them together. The desert, once vast and lonely, now held warmth, hope, and the promise of a life built on understanding and companionship. The desert air was calm, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed earth. The sky stretched wide and open, painted with deep shades of twilight that slowly faded into night. Apache and Daniel had spent the day helping her people organize supplies, repair small shelters, and plan for the coming days. Though it had been a day full of work, both felt a quiet satisfaction in the evening as they stepped aside to rest near the fire. Apache looked at Daniel, noticing the way the firelight danced in his eyes. For weeks, they had traveled together, cared for one another, and learned from each other. Each day had strengthened a bond that neither could have expected when they first met. She realized now that what had begun as simple acts of care and survival had grown into something deeper, a connection of respect, trust, and understanding. "You stayed when I needed you," she said softly, breaking the quiet. "You could have turned back, but you didn't. You didn't just save my life, you gave me hope." Daniel looked at her, his expression calm yet thoughtful. "I did what anyone should do, but I also learned from you, your strength, your courage, your way of facing challenges. I admire it." Apache smiled faintly, feeling a warmth in her chest she had not known before. She had spent her life relying on her instincts and her own abilities. She had learned to survive alone, to be wary of strangers, and to guard her heart. But Daniel's presence had shown her something new, that it was possible to trust, to share, and to build something together without losing oneself. "I have a question," she said, her voice steady now, "and I want an honest answer." Daniel tilted his head, curious. "What is it?" "You need a woman like me," she said. Her eyes held a quiet confidence. "But what would a woman like me need?" Daniel paused, thinking carefully. For years he had lived alone, believing solitude kept him safe. But now he realized that what he had found in Apache was more than companionship. It was equality, strength, and understanding. "A woman like you," he said finally, "needs someone who respects her spirit, who values her strength, and who stands beside her, not in front or behind." I want to be that for you." Apache's eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his hand. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes of trust, warmth, and mutual understanding. They sat together in silence, letting the quiet desert night surround them, feeling a sense of peace that neither had known in a long time. In the days that followed, Daniel stayed with Apache and her people. He helped rebuild structures, tended small gardens, and shared knowledge about livestock and trading. In return, he learned from them, their songs, their stories, and their way of seeing the land as a living, breathing partner rather than just a place to survive. Through shared work and conversation, respect and trust deepened, forming a foundation that was stronger than either could have imagined. One morning, Daniel and Apache walked together to a small ridge overlooking the canyon. The view was breathtaking. Below, the small community moved with purpose, carrying out tasks, exchanging stories, and rebuilding their lives. The river sparkled in the sunlight, and the desert stretched endlessly beyond, a vast canvas of opportunity and quiet strength. "This land is full of lessons," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "It teaches patience, resilience, and understanding, but it also teaches that we are stronger when we stand together." Apache nodded. "I have learned that too. I have survived alone, yes. But I have also seen that help, trust, and care from another person can change everything." They spent the day walking, speaking softly and sharing their thoughts. Apache spoke about the traditions of her people, the songs and dances, and the ways they honored the land. Daniel shared stories of his childhood, the lessons of ranch life, and the quiet beauty of long days spent in the open air. Each story deepened their understanding of each other, revealing how two very different worlds could blend through empathy, respect, and shared experience. As evening approached, the group gathered around a fire. Children laughed softly, elders shared quiet wisdom, and the air was filled with the soft, steady rhythm of community life. Daniel watched, feeling a deep sense of belonging he had not felt in years. He realized that life had given him more than survival. It had given him connection, trust, and a chance to be part of something meaningful. A pony came to sit beside him. "You have changed my life," she said quietly. "Not just by saving me, but by showing me that strength and kindness can exist together. You have given me hope, courage, and friendship." Daniel reached out, taking her hand. "And you have changed mine," he replied. "You have shown me strength, courage, and the value of trust. You remind me that life is not just about survival, but about understanding, connection, and respect." For the first time, Daniel felt a sense of peace that went beyond the physical world. He understood that real courage was not just about facing danger, but about opening oneself to trust, to care, and to share life with someone equally strong and wise. The following days were filled with small routines, shared laughter, and learning. A pony taught Daniel the traditional songs and dances of her people, guiding him patiently. He, in turn, showed her simple techniques for caring for animals, working the land, and preparing food efficiently. Each day brought new lessons, and each lesson deepened the bond between them. One afternoon, while helping repair a small bridge over a stream, a pony paused and looked at Daniel. "We come from different worlds," she said, "but we share the same values: honesty, courage, patience, and care. I feel stronger with you, and I hope you feel the same with me." Daniel smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "I do, more than I ever thought possible." The night that followed was calm and peaceful. Stars filled the sky, reflecting in the river below. A pony and Daniel sat together near the fire, watching the flames dance. They spoke softly of the future, not with certainty, but with hope. They knew life would bring challenges, judgment, and moments of doubt, but they also knew that together they could face anything. "You saved me once," a pony said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you also helped me find trust, hope, and courage." "That is more than anyone could ask for." Daniel took her hand and squeezed it gently. "And you saved me too," he replied. "You reminded me that strength and kindness can exist together, and that real partnership is built on equality, respect, and trust." In the following weeks, Daniel and a pony became an inseparable part of her community. They worked side by side, laughed together, and shared quiet moments under the endless desert sky. Their partnership was not built only on words, but on action, understanding, and shared experience. The people around them respected the bond they had formed, recognizing the strength and wisdom each brought to the relationship. The desert, once vast, lonely, and challenging, now felt full of life and possibility. It had witnessed the growth of two people, from strangers to companions, from caution to trust, and from survival to hope. They had learned that true courage was not only about facing danger, but about choosing to trust, care, and build a life together despite differences, fear, or uncertainty. As the sun set on another quiet evening, Daniel and a pony stood together on a small hill overlooking the community. The wind carried the gentle scent of flowers and warm earth. A pony looked at Daniel, her eyes reflecting both the firelight and the depth of the sky above. "You and I," she said softly, "we have both grown stronger because of each other. You need a woman like me, and I need a man like you. But more than that, we need each other as equals, partners in life, trust, and courage." Daniel nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never known. "And that is what we will have," he said. "Together we will face whatever comes, side by side." In the quiet desert, under endless skies filled with stars, the two stood together. The journey that had begun with an act of kindness had transformed into a deep, lasting partnership built on respect, understanding, and mutual care. They had discovered that life's greatest strength was not just in surviving alone, but in finding someone who could stand beside you, share your burdens, and celebrate your joys. The night grew deeper, and a gentle breeze passed through the canyon. Daniel and a pony sat together in peaceful silence, knowing that the bond they had formed would carry them through any challenge. The desert, vast and enduring, had witnessed the start of a new chapter, one filled with hope, courage, understanding, and the quiet power of trust. In that moment, they realized something important. Saving a life could lead to saving more than just the body. It could save the spirit, teach courage, build trust, and bring two people together in a partnership that would stand the test of time. Their journey was far from over, But together they had found a foundation stronger than the desert itself, one built on care, respect, and the courage to trust and love as equals. And so, under the wide desert sky, with the stars shining above and the gentle sounds of the canyon around them, Daniel and Apache began the rest of their lives, not as strangers, not as savior and saved, but as equals, companions, and partners in a journey defined by understanding, courage, and shared strength.